The penthouse took up the entire 40th floor of one of the most expensive residential towers in Beverly Hills, California. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped around every wall, giving a full panoramic view of the city below. The furniture was custom Italian leather. The floors were polished white marble. The air smelled like cedar and money. And right now, 5 of the most powerful men in the park organization were spread across the living room like they owned the place. They didn't, their boss did. But he wasn't here yet. Selena Monroe was on her hands and knees near the coffee table, scrubbing a dark wine stain out of the marble with a damp rag and a bottle of professional grade cleaner. She was 24 years old, black, with warm caramel skin, deep brown eyes, and long braids pulled back into a neat bun so they wouldn't fall into her face while she worked. She wore the standard uniform for the luxury cleaning company that employed her, a plain gray polo shirt and black pants. Simple, forgettable. That was the point. In places like this, the best thing a maid could be was invisible. She had been working this assignment for 3 weeks now. Every Monday and Thursday, she took the service elevator up to the 40th floor, let herself in with the code the building manager gave her, and cleaned the entire penthouse top to bottom. Most of the time, the place was empty. But today, when the elevator doors opened, she walked straight into a wall of cologne, cigar smoke, and loud male voices. 5 men, all Korean, all wearing expensive clothes, all looking at her like she was a piece of furniture that had been left in the wrong room. She almost turned around, but the job was the job, and she needed the money. So she kept her head down, pulled her supply cart inside, and got to work. For the first 20 minutes, they ignored her completely. They talked among themselves in a mix of English and Korean, laughing, checking their phones, arguing about something she didn't understand and didn't care to. She stayed low, moved quietly, and focused on the stain. Then one of them noticed her. His name was Victor Shin, tall, sharp jawline, expensive haircut. He sat on the longest couch with his arm draped across the back like he was posing for a magazine cover. He had the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He watched Selena work for a few seconds, then kicked his feet up onto the coffee table, knocking over his glass of iced coffee in the process. The dark liquid splashed across the exact section of floor Selena had just finished cleaning. It spread in a slow, ugly puddle right over the spot where the wine stain used to be. Victor didn't even look down. "Missed a spot," he said. The other men laughed. Selena clenched her jaw so hard her teeth ached. She didn't say a word. She just reached for her rag and started over. A stocky man sitting in the armchair across from Victor leaned forward with a grin. His name was Peter Ree, and he had the kind of face that always looked like it was in on a joke nobody else was supposed to hear. He balled up a napkin from the side table and tossed it at Selena. It bounced off her temple and landed on the wet floor. "Yo, somebody tell the help to move faster," Peter said to no one in particular. "The boss is coming, and this place still smells like pine sol." More laughter. A third man, Hugo Bay, leaned forward from the end of the couch and snapped his fingers at Selena like she was a dog at a restaurant patio. "Hey, you, get me a refill." He held out his empty glass without looking at her face. When Selena stood up to take it, he pulled it back and grinned. "Actually, never mind. I don't trust you not to spit in it." The room erupted again. 5 grown men, laughing at a woman on her knees. Selena's hand trembled at her side. Her eyes stung, but she bit the inside of her cheek hard enough to taste copper. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. She never cried in front of people. She had learned a long time ago that tears didn't buy you sympathy in rooms like this. They just gave people more ammunition. She turned back to the floor and kept scrubbing. Then the elevator doors at the far end of the penthouse slid open. And everything changed. Dong-soo Park stepped out. He was 31 years old, tall, lean, sharp features with a strong jaw and dark, intelligent eyes that moved across a room like a scanner, cataloging everything in seconds. His black hair was pushed back off his forehead. He moved with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need to announce itself. The air around him seemed to tighten, like even the atmosphere respected him enough to get out of his way. Dong-soo was the head of the Park family empire, one of the most powerful legitimate business dynasties on the West Coast. Real estate development, luxury hotels, tech ventures, private equity. The park name carried weight in every boardroom from San Francisco to Seoul. People in the business world called them the Korean Mafia, not because they broke laws, but because of how ruthlessly they dominated every market they entered, how fiercely loyal their inner circle was, and how no competitor had ever crossed them and walked away standing. Dong-soo didn't need to break rules. He made the rules, and everyone else played by them. He walked 3 steps into the penthouse and stopped. His eyes swept the room in less than 2 seconds, and in those 2 seconds he saw everything. He saw the fresh coffee spill on the marble floor. He saw the crumpled napkin near Selena's knee. He saw his 5 lieutenants lounging and laughing, drinks in hand, relaxed and entertained. And he saw Selena, on her hands and knees, head down, shoulders tight, scrubbing a mess she didn't make while grown men threw things at her. The laughter died instantly. It didn't fade. It didn't trail off. It stopped, like someone had pulled the plug on a speaker. Dong-soo didn't raise his voice. He spoke in a tone so calm and so controlled that it somehow made the silence even heavier. "What's funny?" Nobody answered. He looked at Victor, then at Peter, then at Hugo, then at the other 2 men who hadn't spoken but had laughed along like it was free entertainment. "Stand up," Dong-soo said. "All of you." They stood immediately, every single one, no hesitation. "Now," Dong-soo continued, his voice still perfectly level, "you are going to walk over to her. You are going to get on your knees, and you are going to apologize to her face." The room didn't breathe. Victor let out a short, nervous laugh, not because anything was funny, but because his brain couldn't process what he had just heard. "Boss, come on, she's just the—" "I didn't ask you what she is," Dong-soo said, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "I told you what you're going to do." Nobody moved for 3 seconds, 3 very long seconds. Then Peter Rhee, the man who threw the napkin, walked slowly across the marble floor, lowered himself to his knees in front of Selena Monroe, and said, "I'm sorry. That was wrong. I apologize." Hugo went next, then the other 2. Victor went last. His jaw was so tight it looked like it might crack. His face was red. His fists were balled at his sides, but he knelt. He looked Selena in the eyes, and he said, "I apologize." Selena stared at all 5 of them. Her rag was still in her hand. Her knees were still on the wet floor. Her heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat, in her temples, behind her eyes. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do. She had never in her entire life seen anything like this. She looked up at Dong-soo. He met her gaze. His expression wasn't soft. It wasn't warm. It was something harder to name, something like recognition. Like he saw her, actually saw her, and what he saw mattered to him. "You can finish whenever you're ready," he said quietly. "No one in this room will bother you again." Then he walked past all of them, down the hallway, into the private study at the far end of the penthouse, and shut the door behind him. The 5 men stood up, one by one, and didn't look at each other. Nobody said a word. Peter Rhee left the penthouse entirely. Hugo suddenly needed to make a phone call on the terrace. Victor sat back down on the couch, but he didn't lounge this time. He sat straight, staring at nothing, his jaw still clenched. Selena finished cleaning the floor. Her hands were shaking the entire time. That night, lying in her bed in her small apartment, she stared at the ceiling and replayed the moment over and over and over. The elevator doors opening. His voice. The way 5 powerful men dropped to their knees because he told them to. The way he looked at her. She whispered into the dark, "Who does that?" She couldn't stop thinking about him, and she hated that she couldn't stop thinking about him. "Now let me ask you something. Have you ever been disrespected in a room full of people and not one single person stood up for you? Because what Dong-soo just did is rare. And trust me, the reason he did it goes way deeper than what you think right now. If you are already hooked, go ahead and hit that like button and listen to the end to enjoy the story fully. Now let's continue. Selena Monroe grew up in Inglewood, California, in a small 2-bedroom house with a chain-link fence and a lemon tree in the backyard that never produced any lemons. She was raised by her grandmother, Ruth Monroe, a woman with silver-streaked hair, strong hands, and a laugh that could fill an entire church sanctuary. Selena's mother, Denise, passed away from cancer when Selena was 9 years old. It was the kind of slow, cruel goodbye that stretches over months and leaves a hole in a child's chest that never fully closes. Selena's father was never in the picture. He left before she was born, and Ruth never spoke his name. When Selena asked about him as a kid, Ruth would just say, "Some people aren't built to stay, baby. That's not your fault and it's not your problem." So Ruth raised Selena alone. She worked 2 jobs, mornings at a dry cleaner on Crenshaw Boulevard, folding and pressing other people's clothes until her wrists ached. Evenings at the kitchen of Greater Hope Baptist Church, helping prepare meals for the homeless ministry. She never complained. She never called in sick. She just showed up every single day because that's what Ruth Monroe did. But Selena had something that set her apart from every other kid in Inglewood, from every other teenager in her high school, from every other young woman in the neighborhoods she grew up in. Her voice. When Selena sang, it was like the room held its breath. Not because she was loud, although she could be. Not because she was technically perfect, although she was close. It was because there was something in her tone that made people feel like she was singing directly to them, like she had reached into their chest and touched something they had been protecting. She started singing at Greater Hope Baptist Church when she was 6 years old. By the time she was 10, the choir director had moved her to the front. By 15, she was the lead soloist. Every Sunday, she stood before the congregation in her white choir robe and opened her mouth, and people who had been tired all week, people who had been struggling, people who had been carrying things they couldn't put down, they would close their eyes and let her voice carry them somewhere lighter. Her choir director, Mr. Thomas, told Ruth one afternoon after rehearsal, "That girl has a gift that only comes around once in a generation. You understand what I'm telling you? Once in a generation." Ruth smiled and said, "God gave her that voice. I just made sure she had somewhere to use it." Selena dreamed of becoming a singer, a real one, the kind who filled arenas and had albums and toured the world. She wrote her own songs in spiral notebooks she kept under her bed. She recorded herself on her phone and uploaded clips to social media. She gained a small but loyal following. A few of her covers went semi-viral, 50,000 views here, 80,000 views there. The comments always said the same thing. "Why isn't this girl famous? Somebody sign her. This voice is criminal." But life didn't care about talent. Life cared about bills. When Selena was 20, Ruth was diagnosed with early-onset dementia. The disease moved fast. Within a year, Ruth couldn't remember where she put her keys. Within 2 years, she sometimes couldn't remember Selena's name. The medical bills piled up like bricks. Medications, specialists, home care aides. Eventually, Selena had to move Ruth into an assisted living facility because she couldn't provide the level of care Ruth needed while also working full-time. The facility was decent but not great. The good ones cost more than Selena could imagine. But it was safe, the staff was kind, and Ruth had a window in her room that let in morning sunlight, which she loved, even on the days when she couldn't remember why she loved it. Selena dropped out of community college to work full-time. She picked up a position with a high-end cleaning company that serviced luxury apartments and penthouses in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, and Malibu. The pay was better than anything else she could find without a degree. The work was hard but straightforward. Show up, clean, leave. Don't touch anything that isn't yours. Don't talk to the clients unless they talk to you first. Be fast, be thorough, and above all, be invisible. Most of her money went straight to Ruth's facility. What was left covered rent, groceries, and bus fare. There was nothing left over for studio time, vocal coaches, or demo recordings. The dream didn't die all at once. It just got quieter and quieter until Selena couldn't hear it anymore over the sound of her own exhaustion. She still sang, in the shower, on the bus with her earbuds in, humming softly enough that no one could hear. Sometimes, when she was cleaning a penthouse alone and the rooms were empty, she would let her voice out, really let it out, and for 3 or 4 minutes she would feel like herself again. Then she would stop, put her rag back in the bucket, and remind herself that feelings didn't pay for her grandmother's medication. She lived in a small apartment in Koreatown, Lowe's Angels, with her best friend, Nadia Osai. Nadia was Ghanaian American, 25 years old, a nursing student at UCLA, loud, opinionated, fiercely protective, and the only person on earth who still believed Selena was destined for something bigger than scrubbing marble. Nadia had a habit of secretly recording Selena, singing around the apartment, and threatening to post the clips without permission. "You're wasting a whole gift, Selena. A whole gift," Nadia would say, waving her phone in the air. "I'm surviving, Nadia. That's what I'm doing." Surviving is not living. You know the difference. Selena always changed the subject. But that night, lying in her bed in their tiny Koreatown apartment, Selena didn't think about her grandmother or her bills or her dying dream. She thought about Dong-soo Park, about the way he walked into that penthouse and read the entire room in 2 seconds, about the way he said, "What's funny?" and made 5 grown men forget how to breathe, about the way he looked at her, not with pity, not with attraction, with something that felt dangerously close to respect. She rolled onto her side and pulled her blanket up to her chin. "Don't do this to yourself," she whispered. "He's a billionaire. You clean his floors. That's the beginning, the middle, and the end of that story." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying. 3 days later, Selena's supervisor called her at 6:30 in the morning. "Monroe, you've got the park penthouse again today. Thursday rotation. Be there by 8. Selena's stomach did something she didn't approve of. She told herself it was the early wake-up. It was not the early wake-up. She arrived at the building at 7:45, checked in with the front desk, took the service elevator up, and entered the penthouse using the access code. The place was empty. Every light was off. The curtains were open, and the Beverly Hills morning poured through the glass in golden sheets. She exhaled. Good. Empty meant she could work in peace. No men. No napkins thrown at her head. No Dong-soo Park making her question her entire understanding of how the world worked. She started in the master bathroom, then moved to the guest rooms, then the hallway, and finally the large open kitchen. It was a beautiful kitchen. White quartz countertops, professional-grade appliances, a center island big enough to seat 8. Selena had never cooked in a kitchen this nice, but she imagined it sometimes while she wiped down the surfaces. She put in her earbuds, turned on her playlist, and started cleaning the countertops. And because she was alone, because the penthouse was quiet, and because music was the only thing that ever made her feel whole, she started to sing. The song was an original. She had written it 2 years ago on the bus ride home from a particularly brutal shift, where a client in Bel Air had complained about fingerprints on a doorknob that Selena was 90% sure were already there when she arrived. She had been tired and angry and invisible, and the words had come pouring out of her onto the back of a gas station receipt. The song was called Invisible Girl. It was about being in rooms full of people who looked right through you, about smiling when you wanted to scream, about carrying yourself with dignity when the world kept telling you that you didn't deserve any. The melody was slow and haunting, built on a simple progression that let her voice do all the heavy lifting. And her voice did lift. It rose and fell and bent and ached and soared in that empty kitchen like it had been waiting for permission to exist. She didn't realize how loud she was singing. The earbuds sealed her off from the outside world, and without that feedback, her volume crept up until she was performing at full power, eyes closed, rag forgotten on the counter, pouring every ounce of herself into a song nobody was supposed to hear. Except somebody was hearing it. Dong-soo Park had come home early. A meeting in Century City had been canceled at the last minute, and instead of rescheduling at his downtown office, he had his driver take him back to the penthouse. He entered through the private elevator on the east side of the unit, the one that opened directly into the hallway near his study. He stepped inside quietly, the way he always moved, and immediately heard something that stopped him mid-step. A voice, coming from the kitchen. He stood in the hallway, completely still. He didn't move closer. He didn't lean against the wall or shift his weight. He stood like a man who had been turned to stone, and he listened. He listened to all of Invisible Girl, every verse, every chorus, every breath between lines. He listened to the way her voice cracked slightly on the bridge, not from weakness but from feeling, from the kind of raw emotional honesty that couldn't be taught or manufactured. He listened, and something shifted behind his ribs, something small and tectonic and impossible to reverse. When Selena finished the song and transitioned into soft humming, Dong-soo quietly stepped back down the hallway. He waited a full minute. Then he walked toward the kitchen again, this time making his footsteps loud enough for her to hear. Selena yanked out her earbuds and spun around, her eyes wide, her face flushed. She saw him standing at the kitchen entrance and immediately started apologizing. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know anyone was home. I was cleaning. I didn't mean to." "There's nothing to apologize for," Dong-soo said. She blinked. "I was being unprofessional. I should have." "You have an exceptional voice." That stopped her cold. She stood there with her earbuds dangling from one hand and her cleaning rag in the other, staring at the most powerful man she had ever met, who had just called her voice exceptional with the same certainty that most people used to state their own name. She let out a nervous laugh. "It's just something I do while I work. Sorry if I was too loud." "I didn't say you were too loud. I said you were exceptional." She didn't know how to respond to that. Nobody in her world used the word exceptional to describe anything about her. The words most often associated with Selena Monroe were reliable, punctual, and thorough. Those were the words on her employee evaluations. Those were the words that kept her employed. Exceptional was from a different language entirely. Dong-soo asked her name. She told him. He asked if she wrote her own music. She was surprised by the question and said yes. He asked why she wasn't performing professionally. "Life happened," she said, and the way she said it, quiet and steady and closed, like a door that had been shut for years, carried so much weight that he didn't push further. He nodded once and walked away toward his study. That night, Dong-soo sat in his home office on the 40th floor. The city lights of Beverly Hills spread out below him like a circuit board, and he picked up his phone. He called his younger sister, Soo-yeon Park. Soo-yeon was 28, based in Manhattan, and managed the family's entertainment and hospitality investments. Upscale lounges in San Francisco, event spaces in Chicago, boutique music venues in Scottsdale and Miami. She was smart, stylish, and had an ear for talent that had made the family's entertainment division one of their fastest-growing sectors. "I heard a voice today," Dong-soo said without preamble. "It stopped me in the hallway." "Where?" "At an event." "In my kitchen." Soo-yeon paused. "Your kitchen?" "The cleaning woman," he said. "She was singing while she worked. She didn't know I was there." Soo-yeon was quiet for a moment, and then she laughed, not mockingly, with genuine surprise. "You're serious." "When have I ever not been serious?" Soo-yeon stopped laughing, because he was right. Dong-soo Park did not make casual observations. He didn't exaggerate. If he said a voice stopped him in the hallway, then a voice had stopped him in the hallway, and whatever Soo-yeon had planned for this week just got rearranged. "Tell me more," she said. Meanwhile, there were things about Dong-soo that the world didn't see. The business press described him as cold, calculated, robotic. His competitors called him a machine. His own employees sometimes whispered that the man had ice water in his veins. He had taken over the family empire at 26 when his father, Chairman Park Min-ho, retired due to declining health. That was 5 years ago, and in those 5 years, Dong-soo had doubled the company's revenue, expanded into 3 new markets, and earned a reputation as someone who never made emotional decisions. But the truth was more complicated. Dong-soo felt things deeply. He always had. As a child, he cried at movies his older cousins laughed at. As a teenager, he wrote poetry he never showed anyone. As a young man entering the family business, he learned quickly that vulnerability was currency, and in his world you couldn't afford to spend it. So he locked it away. He became the version of himself that the empire needed. Controlled, unreadable, alone. He had never been in a public relationship. He had never let anyone close enough to see the man behind the title. And now, standing in his hallway, listening to a woman sing about being invisible, he had felt something crack open inside him that he had spent a decade sealing shut. He didn't know what to do with that, but he was about to find out. 1 week later, Selena arrived at the penthouse for her regular Thursday shift and found Dong-soo waiting for her in the living room. He wasn't alone. Sitting on the couch across from him was a woman Selena had never seen before. She was Korean, late 20s, with a sharp bob haircut, oversized designer glasses, and the kind of effortless style that made everything she wore look like it had been personally selected by a fashion editor. She had a warm smile that somehow coexisted perfectly with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Selena," Dong-soo said, standing. "This is my sister, Soo-yeon. She manages our entertainment and hospitality portfolio." Soo-yeon stood and extended her hand. Her grip was firm, her smile genuine. "My brother doesn't compliment easily," she said. "He told me your voice stopped him in his tracks. I had to come here for myself." Selena shook her hand and immediately felt underdressed, overwhelmed, and completely out of her depth. "I appreciate that, but I think he was being generous. I was just singing while I cleaned. It wasn't a performance or anything." "That's actually what makes it interesting," Soo-yeon said. "Performers perform, artists can't help themselves. They create even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. That's the difference." Dong-soo explained the opportunity. Soo-yeon was overseeing the launch of a new high-end music lounge called Onyx, set to open in Scottsdale, Arizona, one of the wealthiest entertainment markets in the Southwest. The venue was designed to be intimate, exclusive, and built around live vocal performance rather than DJs or cover bands. They were looking for a resident vocalist, someone with raw, authentic talent who could become the signature voice of the venue. "We're not looking for someone who sounds like everyone else on the radio," Soo-yeon said. "We're looking for someone who sounds like nobody else at all." Selena's pulse was hammering in her ears. She tried to keep her face neutral, but her hands were trembling slightly at her sides. "I'm not a professional," she said. "I've never performed on a real stage. I don't have training, I don't have a demo, I don't even have a reel. I'm a maid. That's my job, that's what I do." Soo-yeon leaned forward slightly. "Talent doesn't need a title, Selena. Sing something for me." Selena looked at Dong-soo. He didn't nod or encourage her or give her any kind of signal. He just looked back at her with that steady, unreadable expression. It was entirely her choice. No pressure, no performance, just a question hanging in the air. Selena took a breath, then another. Then she sang Invisible Girl a cappella, right there in the penthouse living room, standing between a coffee table and a couch that cost more than her car. Her voice started soft, almost tentative, like she was testing the room to see if it could hold what she was about to give it. By the second line, she had found her footing. By the chorus, the tentative quality was gone, replaced by something full and aching and undeniable. The song filled the penthouse the way water fills a glass, completely, from edge to edge, leaving no room for anything else. When she finished, the room was silent. Soo-yeon's eyes were glistening behind her designer glasses. She turned to Dong-soo and said, "You undersold her. She's not exceptional. She's once in a lifetime." The offer was laid out clearly. Resident vocalist at Onyx. A salary 3 times what Selena made cleaning penthouses. Housing assistance in Scottsdale. A professional vocal coach. A performance contract with room to grow. Soo-yeon explained every detail, answered every question, and made it clear that this was a legitimate business offer, not charity. Selena's mind went straight to Ruth. The assisted living facility bills, the medications, the possibility of moving her grandmother to a better facility with better care and bigger windows. But she hesitated. "Can I think about it?" Soo-yeon nodded. "Of course." Dong-soo said nothing. He didn't need to. That night, Selena called Nadia from her bedroom and told her everything. Nadia's scream was so loud that the neighbors in the apartment next door banged on the wall. "Selina Monroe, if you don't take THAT offer, I will personally drag you to Scottsdale myself. I will rent a U-Haul. I will put your entire life in the back of that truck, and I will drive you there while you sleep." Selena laughed, a real laugh, the kind she hadn't felt in her chest in months. She said yes the next morning. But here's where things got complicated. Victor Shin, the same lieutenant who humiliated Selena in Chapter 1, the one who knocked over his coffee and told her she missed a spot, the one who knelt and apologized with fury burning behind his eyes, he hadn't forgotten what happened. He hadn't forgiven it either. And when he overheard Soo-yeon and Dong-soo discussing the Onyx arrangement during a conference call that he was supposed to have left the room for, but didn't, something ugly and calculated started forming in his mind. Dong-soo was going soft. That was Victor's read. The boss was letting a cleaning woman get under his skin, and it was going to make the entire organization look weak. Victor had spent 7 years building his position in the Park Empire. He wasn't about to watch it crumble because Dong-soo couldn't separate business from whatever this was. That night, Victor made a phone call. The person on the other end was someone he should never have been talking to. A man named Warren Hale, who ran a competing entertainment and hospitality empire out of Palo Alto, California. Warren had been looking for a crack in the Park family's armor for years. Victor just handed him a crowbar. Scottsdale, Arizona, hit different. Selena arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in early October, when the desert heat had finally started to ease, and the sky was the kind of impossible blue that made everything underneath it look like it had been color-corrected. Soo-yeon's team had arranged a furnished one-bedroom apartment in a clean, modern complex near Old Town Scottsdale. It was small by Scottsdale standards, but to Selena, it was enormous. There was a kitchen with an actual dishwasher. A bathroom with a tub deep enough to submerge in. A bedroom with a window that faced east, so the morning sun poured in like warm honey. She sat on the edge of her new bed and called Ruth's facility. One of the nurses held the phone to Ruth's ear. "Hi, Grandma. I moved to Arizona." There was a pause, then Ruth's voice, thin and far away but clear today. "Arizona? What's in Arizona, baby?" "A stage, Grandma. I'm going to sing." Another pause. Then, so quiet Selena almost missed it, Ruth said, "It's about time." Selena pressed the phone against her forehead and let the tears come. She gave herself 60 seconds. Then she wiped her face, took a breath, and got to work. Onyx was located in Scottsdale's luxury arts district, inside a sleek, dark-fronted building that looked like a high-end jewel box from the outside and felt like a secret from the inside. Intimate, moody, warm. The main performance space seated 200 and featured a small raised stage backed by floor-to-ceiling acoustic panels that made every note resonate like it was being whispered directly into your ear. The bar was stocked with liquors that cost more per glass than Selena's old weekly grocery budget. Everything about the place said money, taste, and exclusivity. Selena's vocal coach was a man named Derek Simmons. He was 52 years old, based in Los Angeles, and had worked with Grammy-nominated artists for over 2 decades. He had been flown to Scottsdale specifically for this project, and when Soo-yeon first told him the gig, he was skeptical. "You want me to coach a cleaning lady," he said flatly over the phone. "I want you to coach a singer," Soo-yeon replied. "What she did before she got here is irrelevant." Derek showed up on Selena's first day of rehearsal expecting to spend weeks on basics, breathing techniques, pitch control, stage presence fundamentals. He figured he would be building from scratch. Selena sang 8 bars of Invisible Girl, and Derek sat down. He took off his glasses. He rubbed his eyes. He put his glasses back on. He looked at Soo-yeon, who was watching from the back of the room with her arms crossed and a knowing smile. "Where have you been hiding?" Derek asked Selena. "Inglewood," she said. Derek worked with her 6 hours a day, not because she needed fixing, but because her raw talent was so enormous that it demanded refinement like a diamond demanded cutting. He taught her breath control techniques that let her sustain notes longer. He helped her develop her stage presence, teaching her how to connect with an audience not through movement or choreography, but through stillness, through the power of standing in one spot and making 200 people feel like she was singing to each of them individually. He showed her how to pace a set, how to build emotional arcs across multiple songs, how to let the silence between notes do as much work as the notes themselves. Selena absorbed everything like a sponge. She woke up at 5 every morning to run through vocal warm-ups before rehearsal. She studied performance videos on YouTube during her breaks. She wrote 3 new original songs in her first 2 weeks. Derek called Soo-yeon after the first week and said, "You didn't find a singer, you found an artist. I'm not building something new here. I'm uncovering something that already existed." Meanwhile, Dong-soo kept his distance. He checked in through Soo-yeon, never directly. He asked for progress reports and read them carefully. When Soo-yeon sent him a video of Selena rehearsing a new song, he watched it 4 times in a row and saved it to his phone. He told himself it was professional interest. He was protecting a business investment. Soo-yeon didn't challenge him on this, but her silence carried a very loud opinion. At Onyx, Selena started winning people over without trying. She remembered the name of every single person on staff, from the head bartender to the woman who stocked the supply closet. She asked the sound technicians about their families. She brought in homemade cookies on Fridays, a habit she had picked up from Ruth, who used to bake for the church kitchen every week. By the second week, the staff had a nickname for her. They called her the Heart of Onyx. Nobody told them to. It just happened. But while Selena was building something beautiful in Scottsdale, Victor Shin was building something ugly in the shadows. Victor had been quietly planting seeds of doubt among key associates in the park organization. He told people Dong-soo was distracted, that resources were being diverted to a pet project that had nothing to do with core business strategy. He implied, carefully, never stating it directly, that Dong-soo's judgment was compromised, that a woman with no connections, no background, and no standing was influencing the head of one of the most powerful business empires on the West Coast. And he did something worse. He reached out to Warren Hale again. Warren, the rival from Palo Alto, had his own entertainment division, and he had been trying to establish a foothold in the Scottsdale market for 2 years. Onyx was a direct threat to his expansion plans, and now Victor was feeding him inside information about the launch timeline, the marketing strategy, and most importantly, about Selena. "She's the weak point," Victor told Warren over an encrypted call. "Take her down and the whole thing falls apart." 2 weeks before Onyx's grand opening, Selena received an anonymous text message on her phone. She was sitting in the break room after a long rehearsal, her voice still warm in her throat, her body tired in the good way. The way that meant she had given everything she had. The text said, "You don't belong in his world. Leave before they make you leave." She stared at the screen. The warmth drained from her chest and was replaced by something cold and familiar. The old fear. The voice in her head that had been whispering the same thing for years. "Good things don't last for girls like you." The grand opening of Onyx was the biggest event Scottsdale had seen in years. Soo-yeon had spent months building anticipation. The guest list was 200 names long and read like a directory of wealth and influence. Business executives from Beverly Hills, tech founders from San Francisco, entertainment industry figures from Los Angeles, socialites, influencers, and media personalities from across the country. Every seat was reserved. A waiting list had formed 3 weeks before opening night. The venue looked immaculate. Low amber lighting cast warm shadows across the dark wood walls. The bar gleamed. The stage was set with a single microphone on a brushed steel stand, a spotlight overhead, and nothing else. No band set up yet, no backdrop, just the microphone, because tonight was about one thing only. Selena's voice. Backstage, Selena was falling apart. She paced the dressing room in her performance outfit, a simple black dress that Soo-yeon's stylist had selected, elegant but not flashy, designed to disappear so the audience would focus entirely on the woman wearing it. Her braids were down, cascading over her shoulders. She looked beautiful, and she felt like she was going to throw up. Her phone buzzed, a text from Nadia, who had flown in from LA that morning. "I'm in the 3rd row. If you don't absolutely destroy that stage tonight, I'm disowning you. I love you. Now go be legendary." Selena laughed, but it came out shaky. Derek Simmons knocked on the dressing room door and stepped inside. He looked at her face and immediately understood. "Selena, listen to me." He put his hands on her shoulders. "Forget the room. Forget the money sitting out there. Forget the names on the guest list. You are not performing for them tonight. You are singing. The same way you've always sung. The same way you sang on Sunday mornings at Greater Hope Baptist. Sing like it's Sunday morning and your grandmother is sitting in the front pew. That hit her right in the center of her chest. She closed her eyes. She saw Ruth, the white choir robe, the wooden pews, the morning sunlight through stained glass. She took one deep breath. She walked out onto the stage. The spotlight found her. The room, which had been buzzing with conversation and the clinking of expensive glasses, went quiet. 200 pairs of eyes turned toward the small stage. Selena stood at the microphone and said nothing for 3 seconds. She didn't introduce herself. She didn't welcome anyone. She just stood there, letting the silence build, the way Derek taught her, until the silence itself became part of the performance. Then she opened her mouth and sang Invisible Girl. From the first note, the room stopped breathing. It wasn't just that her voice was beautiful, although it was. It wasn't just that the song was emotionally devastating, although it was. It was that Selena sang with the kind of truth that most people spend their entire lives running from. Every word landed like a confession. Every note carried the weight of every floor she had scrubbed, every napkin thrown at her head. Every morning she woke up and told herself that surviving was enough even when she knew it wasn't. By the second verse, a woman in the front row was crying silently into her napkin. By the chorus, 3 more people had tears on their faces. A tech billionaire from San Francisco who had once told a reporter that music was background noise for people without ambition, put down his drink and didn't pick it up again. Selena sang 3 songs in her first set. The second was a slow, stripped-down cover that she rebuilt from the ground up, making it entirely her own. The third was a new original, an upbeat, powerful anthem about resilience and self-worth called Still Standing. By the time she hit the final chorus of that song, the entire room was on its feet. 200 of the wealthiest, most sophisticated, most difficult to impress people in the Southwest were standing and applauding like they had just witnessed something historic. Because they had. In the back corner of the room, sitting alone at a table in the deepest shadow, was Dong-Soo Park. He had told Soo-yeon he wasn't coming. He said he had a meeting in Seattle. He said he would watch the video later. But at 7 o'clock, his private car pulled up to Onyx, and he walked in wearing a black suit that fit him like it had been stitched directly onto his body. He took a seat in the corner where the light didn't reach, and he watched. He didn't clap. He didn't stand. He sat perfectly still, and his expression was one that no one in his organization, no one in his family, no one in his entire life had ever seen on his face before. It was the expression of a man watching something he had been looking for without knowing he was looking for it. Selena left the stage after her first set to thunderous applause. She walked backstage and her legs gave out. She sat on the floor of the dressing room with her back against the wall, her hands shaking, tears streaming down her face, laughing and crying at the same time. Derek handed her a bottle of water and said, "That was the best live vocal performance I've heard in 20 years, and I've heard a lot of live vocal performances. You have arrived, Selena Monroe." There was a brief intermission before her second set. Guests refreshed their drinks. Conversations buzzed with excitement. Soo-yeon was glowing, already fielding calls from 2 different media outlets wanting interviews. And then the sound system cut out. The lights flickered. A harsh, static-filled buzz filled the room. Then, through the venue's speaker system, a recording began to play. It was Dong-Soo's voice, spliced together from old recorded business meetings, edited to create sentences he never actually said. The audio was crude but clear enough to understand. The words that filled Onyx that night were, "She's a charity case." And then, after a beat of static, "A publicity stunt." And then, the knife, "She's just a maid." Those words echoed through the room for 4 terrible seconds, before the tech team killed the feed. The room erupted in murmurs, gasps, uncomfortable shifting, 200 people looking at each other with wide eyes. Backstage, Selena heard everything. She was standing near the stage entrance, ready for her second set. When the words, "She's just a maid," came through the speakers, she took a step backward like she had been physically pushed. The blood drained from her face. Her hands dropped to her sides. The water bottle hit the floor. Soo-yeon was on her feet in the middle of the venue, furious, her voice cutting through the chaos as she barked orders at the tech team. Kill it! Kill it now! Find out where that came from. I want every system in this building checked in the next 5 minutes. Dong-soo was already moving. He rose from his corner table and walked toward the back of the venue with a jaw set like iron and eyes that could have cut glass. He knew. He didn't need evidence yet. He knew exactly who had done this, because only one person in his organization hated Selena enough and resented him enough to orchestrate something this deliberately cruel. Victor Shin wasn't in the building. He didn't need to be. He had planted the bomb weeks ago through a newly hired tech contractor who had been paid by Warren Hale's people to install a secondary audio feed in the venue's speaker system. The doctored recording was loaded, time-stamped, and triggered remotely. Selena didn't wait for an explanation. She walked to the dressing room, grabbed her bag, and left through the back exit. She didn't run, she walked. Steady, controlled. The way she always walked away from things that hurt her, with dignity and with the door already closing behind her eyes. Nadia found her sitting on the curb behind the building, arms wrapped around her knees, staring at the concrete. Not crying, just shut down. Like someone had reached inside her and turned off every light. Selena, that audio was fake. You could hear the cuts, the splices, someone edited. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Someone sabotaged. Nadia, Selena's voice was flat, empty. This is what always happens. I get close to something good and it gets taken away. Every single time. My mom, my education, my grandmother's mind. Now this. I'm done pretending the universe has something different planned for me. She pulled out her phone and opened a rideshare app. I'm going back to LA. I'm going back to cleaning. At least that world makes sense. At least in that world. Nobody pretends I'm something I'm not. Nadia's eyes filled with tears, not because she was sad, but because she was furious. Furious at whoever did this. Furious at Selena for giving up. Furious at a world that kept punishing a woman whose only crime was being talented and kind. The rideshare pulled up. Selena got in without looking back. From the back exit of Onyx, Dong-soo watched the car pull away. Felix Yoon, his right hand, stood beside him in the warm Arizona night. Do you want me to handle this? Felix asked. Dong-soo's voice was quiet, controlled. But underneath the control, underneath the calm, there was something that Felix had never heard before. Something that sounded like the moment before a building comes down. Find Victor, Dong-soo said. Tonight. Dong-soo moved with the precision of a man who had built an empire on being 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. Within 48 hours, his private security team had traced the sabotage back to its source. The trail was clean, professional, and stupid, because Victor Shin was arrogant enough to think he was smarter than the man he was betraying. Financial records showed a wire transfer from a shell account linked to Warren Hale's entertainment division to the personal account of a freelance audio engineer named Carl Decker, the same tech contractor who had been hired to work Onyx's opening night. Text messages recovered from Decker's phone showed explicit instructions from Victor about the timing, the audio file specifications, and the trigger mechanism. And there was a recorded phone call, pulled from Victor's own line, because Dong-soo's security team had been monitoring internal communications for months, something Victor apparently forgot. In the call, Victor's voice was crystal clear. If we embarrass the girl publicly, Dong-soo will look weak and the board will question his focus. The evidence was airtight, every piece of it. Dong-soo called a meeting, not a small one. He summoned every lieutenant, every senior advisor, and every department head in the park organization to the family's corporate headquarters in San Francisco. The building was a 40-story glass tower in the financial district, and the meeting took place on the 38th floor, in a conference room with a long mahogany table and windows that overlooked the entire city. 22 people sat around that table when Dong-soo walked in. Victor Shin was among them, seated near the far end, his posture relaxed, his face calm. He thought he was still covered. He thought the doctored audio would be written off as a technical malfunction or an outside hack. He thought wrong. Dong-soo didn't sit down. He stood at the head of the table, set a tablet flat on the surface, and pressed play. The room listened in absolute silence as Victor's own voice filled the conference room. Text messages appeared on the wall-mounted screen behind Dong-su's head. Financial records scrolled across the display in clean, damning columns. The payment to Carl Decker, the connection to Warren Hale, the timestamps, the plan. When the presentation ended, nobody moved. Dong-su looked directly at Victor Shin. "You didn't just sabotage a venue opening," Dong-su said, his voice level, controlled and devastating. "You didn't just undermine a multi-million-dollar business investment. You targeted a woman who has done nothing, except work hard and be extraordinary at what she does. You targeted her because you thought she was beneath you, because you couldn't stand the idea that someone who used to clean floors might be worth more to this organization than you are. And you used my name, my voice, my words twisted into lies to do it." Victor tried. He opened his mouth and tried. "I was protecting the organization. Your focus has been—" "My focus," Dong-su said, and the calm in his voice was more terrifying than any shout could have been, "has generated a 43% increase in revenue across our entertainment division in the last quarter alone. My focus identified and developed a talent asset that has already generated more media coverage in one night than your entire department has produced in 2 years. My focus is not the problem here, Victor. You are." He let the silence land. "Your contracts are terminated effective immediately. Your equity stake will be bought out at base valuation. Security will escort you from this building. If you contact anyone in this organization again, by phone, email, text, carrier pigeon, I don't care. My legal team will bury you in litigation for the next decade." Victor's face went white. He looked around the table for support, for a single ally, for one person who would back him up. Nobody met his eyes. Peter Rees stared at the table with his jaw clenched. Hugo Bay looked at his own hands. 22 people sat in that room, and not one of them moved. Victor stood up. He buttoned his jacket with shaking hands. He walked to the door, flanked by 2 security personnel, and left the conference room without another word. He was gone. After the meeting, Dong-su told Felix he needed to go to Los Angeles. Felix warned him. Going to her personally will confirm everything Victor was saying, that this is personal, that you're emotionally involved. Dong-su looked at him. "It is personal," he said. "She deserves to know the truth, all of it." In Los Angeles, Selena had retreated into the life she knew. She picked up extra cleaning shifts. She worked 7 days a week. She moved through luxury apartments and penthouses like a ghost, scrubbing surfaces and emptying trash cans and never ever singing. Not once. Not a single note since opening night. What she didn't know was that the outside world was losing its mind over her. Audience members from Onyx's opening night had recorded her performance on their phones, and those clips were spreading across the internet like wildfire. A 30-second clip of Invisible Girl hit 2 million views on TikTok in 4 days. A full video of Still Standing was trending on YouTube with hundreds of thousands of views and climbing. Comments flooded every platform. "Who is this girl? Her voice just made me cry on my lunch break. Somebody find her and give her a record deal right now." Entertainment blogs were writing articles. Music journalists were asking questions. Selena didn't see any of it. She had turned off her phone notifications 3 days ago. Nadia tried. She showed Selena the viral clips, the comments, the articles. She shoved her phone in Selena's face at the kitchen table. Look at what people are saying about you. 2 million views, Selena." Selena glanced at the screen and looked away. They're watching a moment. They don't know the whole story. The whole story is that someone sabotaged you, and you're letting them win. I'm not letting anyone win. I'm being realistic. Nadia wanted to scream, but she knew Selena. She knew that when Selena shut down, no amount of shouting would open her back up. It had to come from something unexpected, something that broke through the wall she built. That something came on a Wednesday evening. There was a knock at the apartment door. Selena opened it. Dong-su Park was standing in the hallway of her modest Koreatown apartment building. The fluorescent light above him buzzed faintly. The carpet in the hallway was thin and stained. The walls needed paint. He was wearing a dark coat over a simple white shirt, and he looked as out of place as a diamond sitting on a bus stop bench. No bodyguards, no entourage, just him. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. Selena almost shut the door. Her hand was on the edge of it, ready to push. But something in his expression stopped her. Not confidence, not authority, something she had never seen on his face before. Uncertainty, like he wasn't sure she would listen and he was afraid of what would happen if she didn't. She stepped back. He stepped inside. He stood in her small living room and he told her everything. Victor, the Shell account, the wire transfer, Carl Decker, Warren Hale, the doctored audio spliced from old business recordings. He showed her the evidence on his phone, text messages, financial records, the recorded phone call. He told her Victor had been permanently removed from the organization. Then he put his phone away and said something that bypassed every wall she had spent her life building. "I never called you a charity case. I never thought you were a publicity stunt. The first time I heard you sing, I was standing in my own hallway like a fool because I couldn't move. Your voice did something to me that I still don't fully understand, and I'm a man who understands most things. I didn't bring you to Onyx because I felt sorry for you, Selena. I brought you there because you are the most talented person I have ever encountered. And the fact that the world almost missed you because you were too busy scrubbing other people's floors makes me angry in a way I don't have the right words for." The apartment was so quiet that Selena could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. She stared at him. Her eyes were shining. Her lips were pressed together, holding everything in. She didn't speak for a long time. "Finally," she said, "you came all the way to Koreatown to tell me that." "I'd have gone further," he said. From the kitchen, where Nadia had been standing absolutely still, with a glass of water frozen halfway to her mouth, a loud whisper cut through the silence. "Selena Monroe, if you don't let that man all the way inside this apartment right now, I swear on everything." Despite everything, despite the pain and the betrayal and the weeks of shutting herself down, Selena almost smiled. Selena agreed to come back, but she had conditions. She sat across from Dong-soo and Soo-yeon at a cafe in Koreatown 2 days later and laid them out. Her voice was steady. Her back was straight. She wasn't asking. She was telling. "I am not going to be anyone's project. I want a real contract with terms I understand. I want creative control over my music. I choose what I sing. I choose how I perform it, and nobody edits my work without my approval. And I want a clause that lets me walk away if I ever feel like I'm being used, manipulated, or put in a position where my integrity is compromised. Those are my terms." Soo-yeon looked at Dong-soo. Dong-soo looked at Selena. "Done," he said. "No negotiation, no pushback." Soo-yeon drew up the paperwork that week. It was the most artist-friendly contract her legal team had ever produced. She joked to Dong-soo that he was setting a dangerous precedent. "Good," he said. Onyx relaunched with a second grand opening 3 weeks later. This time, Soo-yeon partnered with a major music blog and a streaming platform that had caught wind of Selena's viral clips and wanted in. The buzz was enormous. Entertainment outlets from LA to New York were covering the story. Not just Selena's voice, but the narrative itself. A maid who scrubbed floors for Beverly Hills elites, discovered by a billionaire, sabotaged on her debut night, and coming back anyway. It was the kind of story the internet was built to love. The second opening night was packed, every seat filled. A line outside the door, media photographers, influencers with cameras, and in the middle of all of it, one woman standing on a small stage with a single microphone. Selena performed a full set of 9 original songs. She opened with Still Standing, and by the second chorus, the audience was already on their feet. She performed Invisible Girl third, and this time she didn't cry. She stood in that spotlight with dry eyes and steady hands and sang every word like she was delivering a verdict. Like she was telling the world, "You tried to erase me. I'm still here." Derek Simmons watched from the sound booth and quietly wiped his eyes. Nadia was in the front row, holding up her phone with one hand and her friend's heart with the other. Beside her, propped on a small stand, was an iPad connected to a live video call. On the screen, in a room at an assisted living facility in Inglewood, California, Ruth Monroe was watching her granddaughter perform. It was one of Ruth's clear days. The fog that usually clouded her mind had lifted enough for her to understand where she was, what she was seeing, and who was singing. Nadia held the iPad steady, and Ruth watched with tears streaming down her face, her frail hands clasped together at her chest. "That's my baby," Ruth whispered. "That's my baby girl." After the show, a man in an expensive gray suit approached Soo-yeon at the bar. His name was Glenn Morrison, a senior talent scout for one of the biggest record labels in New York. He had flown to Scottsdale specifically because of the viral clips. "I need a meeting with her," Glenn said. "Tomorrow, name the time and place." Soo-yeon nodded and said she would set it up, but she made one thing clear. "Selena has final say on everything. If she doesn't want it, it doesn't happen." "Understood," Glenn said, "but after tonight I'd be an idiot not to try." Later, when the venue had emptied and the staff was cleaning up and the photographers had packed their equipment, Selena sat alone on the edge of the stage. Her shoes were off. Her feet dangled over the side. The house lights were low, and the room was quiet in the way that only a room that recently held music can be quiet, still vibrating with something invisible. Dong-soo walked out from the back corner. He had watched the entire show from the shadows, the way he always did. He approached the stage and sat down on the edge beside her. Not too close, just close enough. "How does it feel?" he asked. Selena was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Like I finally took a full breath. Like I've been holding my lungs tight my whole life and I just let go." He nodded slowly. He understood that feeling more than she could know. The pressure of carrying a legacy, of being watched constantly, of never being allowed to be uncertain or tired or human. "You know," Selena said, "when your men were laughing at me on that floor, I wasn't just embarrassed. I was angry at myself, because I thought, this is it. This is all I'm ever going to be. Someone people throw napkins at. Someone who scrubs stains out of rich people's floors and goes home to an apartment she can barely afford and pretends that's a life." "It was never all you were going to be," Dong-soo said. "I know that now." She looked at him. "Because you showed me, not with words, with what you did. You made 5 men kneel in front of me. Nobody has ever fought for me like that. Nobody, my whole life." There was a long beat of silence, the kind of silence that holds everything. Then Selena leaned over and kissed him softly on the cheek. It was gentle, tentative, barely more than a whisper of contact, but it carried the weight of everything she didn't yet know how to say out loud. Dong-soo didn't move. His jaw tightened. His hand, resting on the stage beside hers, shifted just slightly, just enough that his pinky finger brushed against hers. For a man who controlled billion-dollar empires without flinching, who faced down hostile boardrooms and market crashes and rivals who wanted to bury him, that tiny point of contact undid him completely. They sat like that for a long time, 2 people who had been invisible in different ways, finding each other in the quiet. But the quiet wouldn't last. In Palo Alto, California, Warren Hale sat in his office watching the Onyx coverage on his laptop. The positive press, the viral videos, the record label interest. Everything he had tried to destroy was not only alive, it was bigger than before. The sabotage hadn't killed the story. It had become part of the story, and the story was now unstoppable. He slammed his laptop shut and called his fixer. "This isn't over," Warren said. Warren Hale made one final move. It was desperate, clumsy, and driven by the kind of ego that can't accept being outmaneuvered by a woman who used to carry a mop for a living. He contacted a gossip media outlet, a tabloid site known for publishing inflammatory stories first and verifying facts never. He fed them a fabricated narrative claiming that Selena Monroe's rise was entirely manufactured, that her viral clips were staged by the Park family's marketing team, that her voice was enhanced with studio technology during live performances, that she had no real talent, and the entire Onyx operation was a vanity project designed to launder the Park family's public image. The article dropped online on a Monday morning. The headline was cruel and specific. Within hours, it started gaining traction. Comment sections filled with skeptics. Quote tweets amplified the accusations. A small but loud corner of the internet started echoing the narrative that Selena Monroe was a fraud. But Warren Hale made a critical mistake. He underestimated how many people genuinely loved Selena and how fiercely they would fight for her. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Audience members from both Onyx events, people who had been in the room, who had felt her voice in their chests, started posting their own unedited phone recordings with captions that left no room for doubt. I was there. Nobody staged those goosebumps on my arms. I'm a classical music professor, and this woman's voice made me forget where I was. I've been to 100 live shows. This was the most real thing I've ever experienced. Derek Simmons went on Instagram Live from his studio in Los Angeles and spoke for 12 uninterrupted minutes. I've spent 30 years coaching vocalists, he said. Grammy nominees, platinum artists, chart toppers. I'm telling you right now. On my professional reputation, Selena Monroe is the most naturally gifted vocalist I have ever worked with. Period. Anyone who says otherwise either wasn't in the room or is being paid to lie. The bartenders, hostesses, sound technicians, and kitchen staff at Onyx all posted their own testimonials on social media. They talked about how Selena remembered their birthdays, how she brought cookies on Fridays, how she asked about their families, how she treated every single person in that building with respect, regardless of their title. The posts went viral. The hashtag Selena is real trended nationally. Nadia Osei, armed with righteous fury and a Twitter account, launched a thread that would become legendary. 47 tweets long, methodical, savage. She dismantled the tabloid article point by point, exposed the outlet's history of publishing retracted stories, connected the timeline of events to the Onyx sabotage, and publicly asked the question that nobody in the media had thought to ask yet. Who paid for this hit piece, and what do they have to gain? The thread got over 400,000 likes in 48 hours. And then something unexpected happened. Peter Ree, the same man who threw a crumpled napkin at Selena's head in the penthouse that day, the same man who knelt on the marble floor and apologized with shame burning in his chest, released a public statement. It was short, it was direct, and it carried the weight of a man confronting the worst version of himself. I personally disrespected Selena Monroe before I knew anything about her. I treated her like she was less than human because of her job title. I was wrong. I've seen her perform. I've seen her character. Her talent is undeniable, and her kindness is something I didn't deserve. I'm not making this statement because anyone asked me to. I'm making it because it's the truth, and the truth matters. The statement went viral. People who had been on the fence about the tabloid story saw a man from the inside vouching for the woman he once mocked. It was powerful. It was unexpected, and it effectively ended the conversation. The fabricated article collapsed within 72 hours. The gossip outlet quietly retracted it without explanation, but the damage to their credibility was already done. And the real damage was just beginning for Warren Hale. A business journalist in San Francisco, following the breadcrumbs left by Nadia's thread and some very strategic leaks from the Park family's legal team, published an investigative piece connecting Warren Hale to Victor Shin, to the Onyx sabotage, and to the tabloid hit piece. The article included financial records, communications, and on-the-record statements from 3 former Hale employees who had been waiting for an excuse to talk. Warren Hale's investors started making phone calls, not to Warren, but to each other. Within a month, 2 of his largest backers pulled their funding. His Palo Alto entertainment division, the one he had been trying to expand into Scottsdale, shut down operations entirely. His reputation, built on decades of backroom deals and market manipulation, crumbled under the kind of public scrutiny that no amount of money could make disappear. Dong-soo didn't lift a finger. He didn't make a single public statement. He didn't file a lawsuit or stage a press conference. He just sat in his office in San Francisco and watched Warren Hale's empire collapse under the weight of its own dishonesty. Sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Sometimes you just let the truth do what it does. While the outside world sorted itself out, Selena focused on her music. She signed a recording deal, not the first one offered, and not the biggest. She chose the one that gave her the most creative control, the most ownership of her masters, and the most freedom to walk away if the relationship ever stopped serving her art. Soo-yeon helped negotiate the terms, and an independent entertainment lawyer reviewed every clause. Her debut EP featured 6 original songs. Invisible Girl, Still Standing, a ballad called Ruth's Window that she wrote about watching her grandmother stare out at the morning sun on days when she couldn't remember Selena's name. A song called Marble Floors about the penthouse, the napkin, the moment she decided she would never let anyone make her feel small again. And 2 others that she wrote in Scottsdale during the weeks when she thought she had lost everything. The EP was released on a Friday morning and debuted at number 3 on the Billboard charts. Invisible Girl was everywhere. It was played at graduation ceremonies. It was featured on morning shows. It appeared in viral videos of people sharing their own stories of being overlooked, underestimated, and counted out. A high school teacher in Atlanta played it for her class, and a student recorded the moment. The video got 11 million views. Selena performed on a national late-night show. She wore a simple white dress. She stood under a single spotlight. She sang Invisible Girl to a studio audience and a television audience of millions. And when she finished, the host, a man famous for his composure, sat at his desk in silence for 5 full seconds before saying, "I don't think I can follow that." Ruth watched from her room at the new assisted living facility, the better one, the one with larger rooms and a garden and staff who called her by name. Selena had moved her there 2 weeks after signing her record deal. The first check she received, she didn't buy herself anything. She called the facility and said, "I want the best room you have." Selena performed a private concert at an intimate venue in Naples, Florida, one of the wealthiest communities in the country. The audience was small, 75 people, hand-selected by Soo-yeon, industry leaders, music critics, a few journalists, but the person Selena cared about most was in the front row. Ruth Monroe, in a wheelchair, wearing her Sunday best, a lavender dress with pearl buttons that Selena had bought for her. One of the nurses from the facility sat beside her, making sure she was comfortable. When Selena walked out onto the stage and saw her grandmother in the front row, she stopped. She stood at the microphone for 3 long seconds, and for the first time since opening night, tears filled her eyes. But these weren't tears of pain. These were tears of arrival. She sang directly to Ruth for the entire show, every song, every word. And Ruth, sitting in her wheelchair with the lavender dress and the pearl buttons, watched her granddaughter with wide, clear, present eyes. It was a clear day, one of the good ones, and she knew exactly who was singing and she knew exactly what it meant. After the show, Selena knelt beside Ruth's wheelchair and took her grandmother's hands. They were thin and fragile, the same hands that had folded other people's clothes and baked cookies for church kitchens, and held a 9-year-old girl who had just lost her mother. "You did this, Grandma," Selena said. "Everything I am started with you." Ruth touched Selena's face with trembling fingers. Her eyes were bright and clear, and full of a love that dementia could never fully reach. "Baby," Ruth said, "I just gave you the room to sing. The voice was always yours." Later that evening, at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Gulf of Mexico, Dong-soo and Selena sat across from each other at a corner table. The water was dark and calm. The sky was turning orange and purple at the edges. It was the first time they had been truly alone since everything happened. No business, no crisis, no audience, just 2 people sharing a meal and the kind of silence that only exists between people who trust each other. Dong-soo set down his glass and said, "I need to tell you something." Selena looked at him and waited. He paused, and for the first time in the entire time she had known him, the man who never hesitated actually looked uncertain. Like the words he was about to say were the most important deal of his life, and he wasn't sure the terms would be accepted. "I am not good at this," he said. "I have spent my entire life learning how to control rooms, close deals, read people, and stay 3 steps ahead of everyone around me. I'm good at those things. But this, what I feel when I'm near you, I don't want to control it. I don't want to manage it or strategize around it. I just want to be in it, with you, however that looks." Selena studied him across the table. The candlelight caught the sharp angles of his face and softened them. She saw the man who made 5 men kneel for her. The man who flew to Koreatown to tell her the truth. The man who heard her sing through a hallway wall and quietly, without fanfare, without asking for credit, changed her entire life. "You know what I think," she said. "I think you've been invisible too, just in a different way." Everyone sees the boss. The name, the empire, the suit, but nobody sees you, the actual you. He was quiet for a moment, a long moment. "You do," he said. She reached across the table and took his hand. He let her. His fingers closed around hers, and he held on like she was the first solid thing he had touched in years. The story settles 6 months later. Selena's debut EP is certified gold. Invisible Girl becomes an anthem, the kind of song that defines a generation's understanding of resilience and self-worth. She's nominated for 2 major music awards. She performs at festivals and venues across the country. Her social media following passes 5 million. People don't just love her voice, they love her story, her honesty, her kindness. But Selena doesn't let any of it change her. She still calls Ruth every single day. She still brings homemade cookies to the Onyx staff on Fridays because she chose to keep her residency at the venue even after everything else took off. It was where she was reborn, and she wasn't going to abandon it. Once a month, she flies to Scottsdale and performs at Onyx. The shows always sell out in minutes, and every time without fail, Dong-soo is there, in the back corner, in the shadows, watching. He never sits in the front row. He never draws attention to himself. He just watches. And every single time Selena finishes a song, she looks toward that corner. And every single time he gives her the smallest nod, barely perceptible, the kind of acknowledgement that nobody else in the room would notice. But she notices, and it means more to her than any standing ovation ever could. Dong-soo and Selena are together, quietly, privately, on their own terms. He doesn't do press about it. She doesn't post about it. Their relationship exists in the spaces between the public versions of themselves, in the late-night phone calls that last until 3 a.m, in the handwritten notes he sends to her dressing room before every show, in the way she sings the bridge of Invisible Girl, slightly differently when she knows he's in the room, a half-step softer, like she's singing just for him. Nadia becomes Selena's unofficial manager and is thriving. She enrolls in a part-time business program while still finishing nursing school because, in her words, "Somebody has to protect this girl from the sharks, and I didn't survive nursing school to not handle a few record label executives." Derek Simmons tells anyone who will listen, "I coached Selena Monroe." Selena always corrects him with a smile and says, "He refined me. My grandma coached me." Peter reaches out to Selena privately, 6 months after his public statement. He asks if he can buy her coffee. She says yes. They sit in a cafe in Beverly Hills, and he tells her something he's been carrying since the day he threw that napkin. "When the boss made us kneel," Peter says, staring at his coffee, "I was angry. I thought it was humiliating. But that night I went home and I couldn't sleep. Because I realized I wasn't angry at him. I was angry at myself. Because I knew what I did was wrong and I did it anyway, and it took someone else to hold me accountable for something I should have held myself accountable for. You didn't deserve what I did, and I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." Selena looks at him for a long time. Then she says, "I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because carrying it is heavier than letting it go." Peter nods. His eyes are red. He doesn't say anything else. The final image of the story is this. Selena Monroe stands on a stage. The lights are warm on her skin. The microphone is in her hand. The room is full of people who came to hear her sing, people who bought tickets and stood in lines and traveled from other cities because her voice does something to them that they can't explain and don't want to stop feeling. She closes her eyes for a moment before the first song, and in that moment, behind her eyelids, she sees herself. Not the woman on the stage, the other her. The girl on the marble floor in Beverly Hills, the one with the rag in her hand and the napkin on her temple and the sting in her eyes. The girl who kept her head down and told herself that invisible was the safest thing to be. She opens her eyes. That girl is gone. This woman is seen. This woman is heard. This woman is loved. By millions of strangers who found themselves in her music. By a grandmother who gave her everything. by a man who heard her sing through a hallway wall and made 5 men kneel because he believed she deserved better before he even knew her name. Selena Monroe will never get on her knees for anyone again. She opens her mouth. She sings, and the room holds its breath.